whisky. But for most of the 1980s, this same product was sold as pure malt, not labelled as single malt. Now, let's maybe...
Now let's start the video again, because Mingus has completely stuffed it. Mingus, why would you even sit there? Welcome back once again to the one, the only, the single malt review. It's always good to have you here. Now, if you're at all familiar with the channel, you'll know that we sort of make our stock and trade in having a look at new hot bangers, new releases in the whisky world to keep things sort of very, very current. But we're sort of breaking with tradition by going with something a bit traditional today, as Dave has come into possession of something just a wee bit classic over here.
Yeah, it's a little bit of antique. What we have here is Glenfiddich Special Reserve. This is a no age statement single malt, and it's taken us a little bit of research to try to pin down roughly when it's from, because the Special Reserve line was discontinued around the year 2000 and replaced with, I believe, the 12-year-old as Glenfiddich's entry-level whisky. But throughout most of the 1980s, this was sold instead as Glenfiddich Pure Malt. More or less the same whisky, different labelling. And yeah, other little hints here and there. This label is devoid of any of the usual health warnings and standard drink counts and the like, which were again a byproduct of the 1990s. So, all these things together, we believe we're going to say this is roughly the year 1990.
Pretty well circa 1990. Muddying the waters significantly is that, as you can probably see by the enormity of this tin, this is a duty-free bottle.
Yeah,
so
colossal 1 litre.
That confuses things like the strength, which is 43% ABV, which is, you'll note, stronger than a lot of Glenfiddich whisky today. So that's a bit of a shame for the modern consumer, but that also may exempt it from the British government health warning, which would normally be a really easy way of dating these bottles. Because of course this one does not have it, which was it an off-the-shelf sort of sold in Britain normal bottle that would put it squarely pre-1990, but we couldn't say that for a fact with this one. At any rate, we're not really interested in the sort of the whodunit of when this was put into the bottle. We're going to take it out of the bottle,
and give it a try,
and rip into it. So hold your breath, whiskey collectors. Your stock's about to go up in value.
Yes, this bottle itself is somewhere between 28 and 18 years old. We can't be absolutely certain, of course, but hey, we can try it anyway.
And this will be fascinating. It's really, really not often that us, or indeed anybody, gets to try genuinely historic whiskey. And this is going to be weird in a lot of ways. It'll be weird because it'll be a no-age statement Glenfiddich, which of course you can't get any more from their usual range anyway. It'll be weird because it's now so old that it may have begun to take on some bottle-aged characteristics. Whiskey will begin to age and change in the bottle eventually. It just doesn't do it particularly fast.
Research tells us this would be a blend of 8, 9 and 12-year-old spirit, which, if we go with our 1990 bottling date, would mean that some of what's in here was distilled in the very late 70s. Quite a few years before either of us were born, in fact.
And anyone thinking this is some hideously valuable thing, it's really not. You can pick up these this particular age of Glenfiddich bottles fairly cheaply at auction. Most places around Europe and the UK. It's one of the more common sort of holdover whisky brands out there.
The plastic screw cap is not something you often associate with single malt Scotch whisky, but hey, it was a different time, a dark time. Somehow our ancestors coped with this.
Hey, screw cap was hot stuff back then. Corks were old fuddy business.
Which means that we've just released a tiny, tiny pocket of genuine circa 1990 European air, fully replete with its chlorofluorocarbons and acid rain and goodness knows what else.
Who knows?
Releasing
Who knows?
back in
You
the
can
day.
practically smell the Thatcherism.
Yeah.
Hopefully not. Ideally so. Is Thatcher still alive?
Baroness Thatcher, I believe, passed away a couple of years ago.
Oh well, never mind. So, here we go. As for colouring and chill filtration, probably. Probably. Who knows whether that was as common practice as it was these days, or whether that was kind of new tech. But we'll see if we can find out along the way.
The label is almost disarmingly bare bones. There's the alcohol percentage, some advertising guff about it being the greatest thing ever invented by humanity, but no other details. Filtration, standard drinks, social media links. Everything we're used to seeing on labels now, just not there.
It looks a lot like Glenfiddich, which is to say that if it is coloured, it's not supremely so.
Although, it'll be quite a young whiskey
Oh dear,
otherwise.
we're just plagued by cats today. Are you going to be good, Charlie? Because if not, down you go. All right, well, you can wrangle him for the time being. All right, we'll have a sniff. Now, this one may change markedly over the course of the episode. Over the course of the sort of 10 or so minutes we give it, being such an old whiskey, they do tend to sort of take a wee time to wake up and realise, what century, or in this case, millennium they're in, and they can change a lot. So we'll see how we go with it.
First impressions are good, though. For an overwhelmingly young whiskey, that's got quite a bit of... young at the time it went in the bottle, of course. That's got some character, some depth to it. There's a bit of raw, fresh spirit to it.
Yes,
but also some fruit, some little bit of spice, some citrus, things like I commonly expect for a Glenfiddich. You certainly would. The last thing you'd say was that it smelled sort of tired or old. It's definitely the smell of young whiskey, but it's hugely vibrant. And of all the things I'm going to have to look this up, whether they were still doing their own malting at this time. That would have been a real key bit of research, which we've completely forgotten to do. What did they say on their carton? There's something about them being the only Scottish distiller who did all of various parts of a process.
Oh, that was distilling, bottling, and yada yada. They didn't mention malting,
right.
But at one stage they will have malted their own stuff. I'm just not sure if they would have still been doing it when the majority of the whiskey distilled in here went in. So if they were indeed doing their own malting, then there could be a peated component in here. Things are about to go badly wrong. Hold on. Stand by.
We have a cat straying near the microphone. There we go.
Saved it. And back to the normal.
Microphone just peeking into the corner of the frame there, but I'm sure we'll cope.
We'll cope. We'll be fine.
Yeah.
So, right, where was I? Yes, if this is their
Traces
own...
of peat.
If there's their own malting, this will be actually a very different whiskey than modern Glenfiddich, because all distilleries, they all had a slightly different arrangement for doing their peating. And Glenfiddich would have been quite a large distillery even way back then compared to... It certainly wouldn't have been a fraction of its size now, but it still would have been pretty big business compared to its neighbours. So they would have had a pretty... Even if they were still doing their own malting, they would have had a pretty mechanical operation, but it still would have had its own character to it, rather than just coming from the local sort of factory maltster, which is the practice today. So we'll see what we can dig out of there. I'll admit I have quite a bad cold at the moment, so we might be leaning on Dave as the primary nasal asset this episode.
I am in good health lately, so I should be able to get something out of this.
But yeah, primary notes on here: quite good, keen, young, vibrant whiskey.
Oh, blimey, that is rough. That is very harsh. That is full of fresh and extremely youthful spirit notes. A little bit of an acrid finish. Oh, that's almost got a little bit of a vodka edge going on in it. It's maybe more time to freshen.
That is a...
It is a sandpaper on the palate. It is kind of relentless and
a completely different animal to modern Glenfiddich 12-year-old, which is the closest kind of analogue we have to it now. It has so much less of the sort of gentility to it. It's a really, really punchy, expressive whiskey.
Yeah, I think it's going to soften up and open up over time. So I'm going to get a little bit of warmth into here, swirl it a little, get some more air going through, because I think this will transform somewhat. It's just its initial sip after being in the bottle for so long. I'll give it time, give it some atmosphere. I think we'll get more out of this. Yeah,
it's sort of... it's quite raw and crunchy. And
it's a really elemental whiskey. It's minerals, the rocks, and
grainy. It's way less fruity than the current any edition of Glenfiddich, 12, 18, 15, whatever you like. This one is much sort of grainier, gristier, crunchier kind of a texture, much pricklier, more spirituous whiskey as well.
It's almost like I'm getting the impression of there being grain alcohol in it. Obviously, isn't because it's a single malt, but it has that same kind of a rough, slightly fiery edge to it. Yeah,
it's spicier too. There's sort of a slightly dry kind of a spiciness going on. It's remarkably, remarkably different. That's really, really fascinating. I always knew we were going to try something that was going to be different, but just how different I wasn't quite prepared for. And I'm sure, even slightly impaired by sickness though I am, there is more than a couple of threads of smoke going on in there. This is this is old style Speyside whiskey, as opposed to the modern Glenfiddich 12, which kind of is the cutting edge of the new style of Speyside whiskey. The sort of super gentle, super fruity, maybe not quite neutral, but very, very unassuming, almost said underwhelming, but that would be a bit Freudian.
But don't Glenfiddich, Highland, surely, or are they close enough to Speyside?
Speyside whiskey.
He called himself the authentic Highland malt.
Well, I mean, I suppose all Speyside is in the Highlands. This could have been before all the nonsense with whiskey regions, but no, Glenfiddich is quite classically Speyside.
No, I just do lose track sometimes. I know some of those boundaries have been a bit
changeable. It means very little ultimately, but yeah, they are. Glenfiddich, not too far away from Tom and Toole, kind of down the road from their neighbour/rival, Glenlivet. Got it first time. Yeah, so no, it's all sort of a bit of a cluster in there.
There's quite an oily cling to that too. There's a lot of body here for something which has probably been filtered quite generously.
Well, you see, it might not have been as well. That could be the thing. They might not be chill filtering their whiskey at that stage. I mean, they could well have been. Like I say, we didn't research this exhaustively. We were more interested
to find out, trying to pin it down to a particular date.
More interested in what it tasted like than anything else. Not getting any cloud on that, but that doesn't necessarily mean it was or was not.
Yeah.
So let's see what the water does anyway.
It's softened the nose a lot. It's honed in on some lemon and grapefruit citrus notes.
That makes a big difference. That
is softer and sweeter already.
Yeah, that brings it much closer into line with your classical 12-year-old, well, your modern classical 12-year-old Glenfiddich, I think. That much fruitier.
Peaches, apricots, and lemon drop sweets.
And still that bit of smoke.
Yeah, just
it's
enough
absolutely
to add a bit of
beguiling. Yeah,
that's a market improvement, though.
This is really, really interesting stuff. Am I getting a cloud here?
Like any bottle of whiskey is basically a time capsule already because of the time it takes to mature. In this case, it's even more so because of just how long ago this was bottled. This was something made for the market and the tastes that existed, possibly nearly 30 years ago. And obviously, times have changed a lot. Whiskey has changed a lot, and it's a good chance to see what the average consumer would have been looking for in a whiskey back in the day.
Yeah, as far as comparisons go to things you could actually buy or taste today, contemporary whiskies, I think the closest I could think of is, and it's not that close, Ben Rick, 10-year-old. Oh. Ben Romick, I should say, Ben Romick. That distillery in its current form is specifically sort of designed to recreate that older, slightly smokier, more elemental, raw style of Speyside whiskey. This style of whiskey, only they have a significant sherry component in their whiskey, which this does not. So if you imagine a Ben Romick maybe without the sherry component, and I think you would be about as close as you can come with modern whiskies, but it really is quite a different flavour. I'm pretty sure I can see cloud on this now. I think this might be an unchill filtered whiskey.
Wow, I didn't get any clouding, but then I had a different quantity of water to a different quantity of whiskey, so... But that's improved by leaps and bounds with the addition of some water, and just with some passage of time in the glass, it has transformed quite a bit.
And now the question, the really important thing, would you pick this over Glenfiddich 12-year-old, the closest living relative? If one takes the sort of the rarity and excitement factor over this, if you could get a bottle of this any day and it was the same price, would you go this one or would you go the 12?
I'd almost certainly go for the 12, just because of the certainty of having a single age statement. It's a more kind of a uniform, a more tighter, focused set of flavours and aromas that are going to come from it.
I'd go for the 12 as well, but I think this is... It's maybe, not to say it's a bad whiskey, I think it's a perfectly serviceable whiskey, but was I giving it points for interest and relevance and sort of the historical snapshot that it is into the style of Speyside whiskey and what it used to be? Really, honestly, not that long ago. I mean, 1990 may be, but that's not the past. I mean, they had functioning, like the Game Boy back then and stuff. It was modern days. Nothing manifestly has changed. that would, was I applying points for that? I think it would go well above, because it is so interesting. But yeah, in terms of composition of the whiskey, I think Glenfiddich 12-year-old does what it does so effortlessly, so well these days, that I think it is just a slightly better whiskey, was I to pick the two. But I'm just so glad we got a window into how it used to be. Shall we give it a score just for old times' sake?
Yeah, I think so.
See how it ranks up. No, I think I gave the 12, it was a high 80s at least. This one I would go sort of down to an 86.
Right.
For this one, I still think it's really, really good, considering it's a no-age statement whiskey, even though we know the age of the whiskey that's in there. I think it's still really pretty solid stuff. What do you think?
Rating it solely on this experience as whiskey, it gets an 80 from me. It's by no means lacking. It's not particularly outstanding in any respect. It has that very confrontational, very rough first sip. So it's a bit of a hurdle to surmount to get into the good stuff. But it's worth persisting through those initial sort of recoiling of the senses to savour some of the more nuanced whiskey underneath. So not amazing, but definitely not lacking.
Yeah. Truly fascinating as well. Tasting old Speyside style that's actually genuine. You know, it's actually from that period, not a recreation, not a sort of a near as damn it guess at recreating the style. That is something that you just do not see anymore. So,
and also just a very generous gift from someone who simply felt he didn't have much use for it and thought might get more out of it.
As I say, it's not rare per se. There's lots of these knocking around at auction. I've seen them for under €60. Maybe not the litre bottles, but they're sure as hell out there. So if you are interested, and I think people that are into their Speyside whiskey and the history of it should be, it's, especially if you're in the UK or Britain, really, really easy to pick one up. Won't cost you a great deal at all. So it's certainly attainable. But I hope that was of some interest, just to sort of taste it vicariously with us today. Thank you once again for joining us. I'm getting really, really close to the edge of having to blow my nose now, so we'll end the episode before we have to grace you with that one. Thank you for sticking around. We'll be right back with something, well, alas, a bit more contemporary, but nonetheless very exciting, I'm sure. Slanger, we'll be right back.